All right, we'll let people in then. And sorry, this is Valerie. She works with me.
Oh, hello.
I just want to fix the speaker view before there we go. Okay, we're good. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Very excited to speak with these three incredible authors. Three incredible, wow, you've all written other books as well. So yeah, not just three incredible books, I should say.
Thank you so much for having us. And thank you guys all for joining us tonight too. We really appreciate it.
Hey everyone.
So So what I'll do is I'll go around and I have a short bio on all three of you, but I mean, we want to hear from you. We don't want to hear what the publishers have printed online. So I'll just read it off very quickly because it does give all the wonderful awards and whatnot that you have achieved. So, and authors are less likely to claim those themselves. So that's always interesting. But then we'll hear directly from you, and you can, if each of you can just give us a little bit of intro and how you got into writing and just like that initial journey, um, that would be great. So Anna, help me with your last name.
It's a rough one. Rasche.
Rasche. Okay.
Mhm.
Anna Rasche is a historian and gemologist who has previously worked in the jewelry collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which I think must be like such a great basis for being an author.
For sure.
and and as a curatorial fellow at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. And now I've already got your last name. Rasche debut
Hmm.
is based on original research she conducted on the uses of gemstones and medieval medicine at the Copper Hewitt Museum and on site in Italy. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and her infant daughter.
Mhm.
Now, is this outdated? Is your daughter still an infant?
More toddler, actually. I have
Okay.
been reading that and saying, why did we even say that? But yeah, frozen in
Yeah,
time as
because
a
it's
baby.
yeah, it's not time. Okay, so RaeAnne Thayne, New York Times bestselling author, so many books, finds inspiration in the beautiful northern Utah mountains. Who wouldn't, right? Where she lives with her family. Her books have won numerous honors, including 6 Rita Award nominations from Romance Writers of America and Career Achievements, and Romance Pioneer Awards from RT Book Reviews. She loves to hear from readers and can be reached through her website.
Mhm.
And
Hello.
lastly, hi, sorry.
That's okay.
And lastly, Madeline Martin is a New York Times USA Today, Publishers Weekly, and international best-selling author of historical fiction and historical romance with books that have been translated into over 25 different languages. She lives in sunny Florida with her 2 daughters, known collectively as the Minions. 2 incredibly spoiled cats and a man so wonderful he's been dubbed Mr. Awesome. She's a die-hard history lover who will happily lose herself in research any day. So
Mhm.
I'm going to ask RaeAnne to start because I feel like your bio doesn't really do you justice. So if you can just give us a little intro into your career as a writer and how it all got started, that would be really wonderful.
Sure. Well, I started in journalism. I was a newspaper reporter and editor long ago, back in the old days of old computers. And I wanted to start writing. I've been a reader all my life. I wanted to write a book at some point, and as many journalists and people in that kind of business decide they want to do that. So I sat down one day. I was on maternity leave with our daughter, who's now 34. So that tells you how long ago it was, and started writing, and it was horrible. And so I kept revising and learning the craft and trying again. And I finally sold my first book in 95, and I finished my 76th book last week. So
Whoa.
been at it for a while, yes. And I've written kind of a wide gamut of books. I've written romantic suspense, I've written small town romance. I've written women's fiction. Now my books are kind of straddling romance and women's fiction at this point. Although my Christmas books, which I think is when we're talking about, they're more strictly more romance, Christmassy romance, Hallmark kind of books.
I have to ask just before we sort of move away from this, but like, what does that feel like? 76.
You know, it's surreal to me, and it's really one deadline at a time. You don't think about it in terms of that many books. But I mean, my first book came out in '96. So when you say that, it is a lot of books. But in the romance world, I'm a baby compared to lots of my friends who've written lots and lots more books than I have. But it does feel amazing. Every time I sit down to write, it's hard, and I think I can't do this. It's hard. You'd think it would get easier after so many books, but it does not, because you're trying to dig deeper with every single book and make it an enjoyable experience for your readers, but not something that you've written before. When you've done so many books, it's kind of hard to make sure it's original and unique. I do. It does feel like a sense of achievement, the fact that I've been able to pull it off, even though I didn't think I could, 76 times. And every single book, I think I can't do this again. It's so hard, and somehow I do it again.
It's amazing. Well, thank you for coming again.
Of course.
Let's go to Madeline next.
So I actually, so on maternity leave as well, really got interested in the idea of the possibility of writing romance. And my daughter, my oldest is 18 now, so I'm not quite there with you, but I have written romance as well. I started initially doing that. I wrote 35 romances, which is nowhere near what you've written. And then I switched gears and I started to write historical fiction. And it's funny because I knew that I wanted to write historical fiction, but I knew that I was going to need a little bit more time to do that. And is it horrible to say that I ended up getting laid off from my job? And I was able to kind of try going full time as a writer, because at that point I was writing like 6 to 8 books a year. I was working full time as a business analyst, and I have 2 daughters, and they always come first above all else. So when I was laid off, I thought, okay, this really gives me the perfect opportunity to be able to delve into all the historical research that I need to do to really give me the opportunity to write this book. And I was super excited because after over 10 years of basically writing in the middle of my living room, I was going to have the entire house to myself, and it was going to be quiet and wonderful. And that was February 2020. And the pandemic happened 3 weeks later, and everybody was home. But I was still able to write my first historical fiction, The Last Bookshop in London. And the new one that just came out, The Booklover's Library, is now my 4th historical fiction. I realized kind of in that time that not only am I a history nerd, I'm also a huge research nerd, and I absolutely love it. And I just love delving into history and learning as much as I can.
Isn't that funny that you were writing romance before without really understanding that maybe your niche is like somewhere else?
I know, yeah. Well, and it's funny because I kept jumping historical genres. Like I was doing like the 1700s, and then I jumped and did medieval, and then I jumped and did Regency. And I think it's because I was really excited about researching those new time periods.
Right. Anna.
Yes. Well, I am at the opposite end of the spectrum of these impressive ladies, and I'm excited to learn from them tonight because this is my debut novel. So you are all witnessing the birth of my writing career. Um, so as you said in my publisher bio, my day job is I'm a gemologist and jewelry historian, which means I evaluate old jewelry and research it to determine how old it is, what it might be worth, is it authentic to that period or reproduction. And I do this for museums or also for dealers and private clients and things like this. So I was doing research in this vein, and I was looking up the uses of coral in the Middle Ages in Italy. There's all sorts of different places it showed up, kind of in magical contexts and medicine and religious and contexts, and I became really fascinated by it. And then as I was reading further about this, I realized there's this whole category of manuscripts called medieval lapidaries. A lapidary is basically like an encyclopedia, but it just lists stones. And alongside kind of straightforward scientific facts, there's also magical facts. So I just thought this was the coolest idea for a novel if there was a person who had access to these powers. So, like Madeline, I love doing research. It's super fun. So I thought it would be a really neat project to try and write a really close historical fiction, kind of as accurate as I was able to get it. But the one deviation from real life is that the magical powers of these stones actually work. So that was kind of the impetus. I don't have a creative writing background. I do have experience academic writing, so I knew like I could, get a certain word count onto a page and it would be vaguely and under legible. And then I also, for a long time, I ran a series of fun history lectures in bars I'm in Brooklyn, New York. So we would just get up and kind of give like silly 15-minute PowerPoints. And people liked those. So I knew that I had, from the positive reaction to that, I was like, okay, I can tell a story in this sense. So I kind of had that little bit of confidence. And that's what led me to writing this whole dang book. And here we are today.
I would go to those, by the way. Those the
They were
bar chats with history. That's awesome.
they were so fun because again, like when the pandemic happened, we stopped doing them and they haven't started up again, but maybe one day. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was going to say, but isn't that just so great to have three authors in sort of like different points of their career? And your debut novel is fabulous, by the way. So everybody should definitely check that out. Um, so when we have a panel, and especially with different genres, it's we like to find some inspiration that binds so that you can all answer. But I do have individual questions for each of you. But I'm just going to throw out a couple of questions there that you can chime in if you like. If it sort of resonates with you in your book, then that's great. Also, I want to just put this on the audience. Any questions that you have, please feel free to put them in the chat window, or if you'd like, you can absolutely put your hand up and ask live, which is always fun and engaging. So yeah, if there's any author here that about any book, really. I mean, they're all here to talk about specific books that they have coming out or have just been released. But we can talk about anything, really. So my question for all three of you, or anybody who sort of wants to answer this specifically, is about character development. And how do you approach creating relatable characters, and what techniques do you use to ensure that they resonate with your audience?
I can answer. I don't want to step on anybody else's toes. Um, Character is the most important thing for me when I'm plotting a book. I'm very much a plotter, but I start with the characters, and I do a fairly intensive character sheet in terms of I need to know their motivations. I need to know the turning points for those characters. I need to know what their arc is going to be and where they start and where they're going to end up and some of the steps along the way. And that's sort of how I end up plotting a book. For me, it's about making them someone that I want to spend time with. I'm going to be in their heads for 5 months or however long it takes me to write the book. And I want them to be someone that I'm interested in. Not perfect, of course, because we can't write perfect characters or nobody wants to read that. They have to have flaws. They have to have room for growth, or else there's no arc for their stories. And so that's sort of where I start. I'm in the middle of plotting a new book right now. So I'm in my favorite part where I'm just thinking about who are these people? What is their story? What do I want to accomplish that I haven't done in 76 other books, and that's unique and different.
Thank
I
you.
characters are so incredibly important as well. With historical fiction, I heard somebody once said, if you wanted to know what happened in history, you would read nonfiction. But if you want to know how people felt, then you read historical fiction. And so for that reason, characterization is so immensely important. So if somebody in the book has more than just a couple of lines, chances are pretty likely I have a whole dossier on these characters that I've composed that is, their entire backstory, like what they experienced when they grew up, what they like, don't like, all their flaws, kind of like what RaeAnne was talking about as well. But because I also do write historical fiction, I do a lot of research, not just on that particular time period that I'm researching, but even like a couple hundred years beforehand, like the socioeconomic, the government history. because it really does make such a difference to kind of get a feel for why people behave and think the way that they do in that particular time period and that particular country. So like one of the examples that I like to give about that is like with the last bookshop in London. At one point, Buckingham Palace gets bombed. And I feel like in America, like if the White House got bombed, like America would want to go kick butt, right? But when Buckingham Palace gets bombed, which happens in the beginning of the Blitz, the Queen says, well, now I can look the East End in the face, the East End being the part of London that got hit the worst in the Blitz. And the people say, look at the king and queen, they're being bombed just like us. So the whole point of the Blitz was to demoralize the British people, but really it ended up bringing them together. And that's a very British stiff upper lip sort of mentality, and sort of researching and understanding exactly what makes that mentality based off of what they've been through in their history really helps understand the mindset of those characters at that point in time.
So I think fundamentally people are the same no matter what time or place they lived in. Of course, they're affected by the culture, their different cultures or the different things that are going on in their time. So for my book, that was Stone Witch of Florence is set in the 1340s, which feels very far away. So I tried to draw a lot on my own experiences and the experiences of my friends, things they've gone through, things I've gone through, and how we would feel in these situations. So, of course, it's not exactly the same, but you think, okay, the character is going to be anxious at this moment. Like, how do I feel when I'm anxious? How does that manifest physically, internally, things like that? And I think that is how I tried to make sure my characters are understandable and relatable, even though they lived, many centuries ago. Less organized than the ladies who have written many, many books, but this was my going into it approach.
Thank you. All really interesting perspectives. I actually think we missed the point. I think we should go back and actually, if you can just take a couple of minutes or a minute maybe to present the book that you've most recently published or that we're here. RaeAnne, is yours out yet?
No, it comes out next Tuesday.
Oh, very, very soon. Okay. So, very, very holiday, festive. Everybody loves a good festive read. So, maybe you kick off and tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure. This is the December market is about a woman who lives in a small town. She feels a lot of pressure because her family sort of caused a lot of problems in this town. It's based on a fictional town in Idaho. And so she feels a great obligation to serve the people of her community. Even though she's dealt with some tragedy in her life, she really tries to serve. So she is the organizer of this Christmas market that they do every year in this little town. It's become a regional sensation for people who love to celebrate Christmas. And so she organizes it, runs it every year. It's her way of giving back to this community. And the last thing she wants is another relationship. She's been there, done that, and not at all interested. And yet, when her life is sort of drawn into the life of her, so she has a grandmother who lives in this little retirement community. Her grandmother starts dating. Her grandmother's 80 years old and starts dating someone else. She's not thrilled about it, so she enlists the help of the grandson of this older man about trying to drive the two apart. Though he's not as opposed to the relationship as she is. But anyway, and then through the course of the story, of course, there's a romance between them as well. So it's kind of a multi-generational romance. There's lots of Christmas stuff, lots of hot chocolate, all the things we love at Christmas time. Very cozy and very warm and fun.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll ask you to go next because your book comes out next Tuesday as well.
Yeah, woo, October 8th. Yes, so my book is The Stone Witch of Florence. It's so shiny and I love it. And it is a historical fiction about a young woman who has to draw on the ancient magic of gemstones to solve a series of thefts during the Black Death. So there's in the Middle Ages, relics, pieces of saints that were kept in churches were very important, and everybody believed that these saints' relics had protective powers. So when the churches are all abandoned during the Black Death, nobody's watching them. They've all fled or passed away. The relics of Florence start disappearing. And this is a disaster for the people of Florence because that's the last line of defense they have between themselves and the Black Death. So my protagonist is named Ginevra, and she has a magical coral amulet that keeps her immune from the Black Plague. So they ask her to investigate. And in exchange, she will have her exile rescinded. She was banished years ago for being a little bit too forward with her healing powers, and the men in charge didn't like that. So she's come back to the city in this dangerous time, trying to do something for the people that kicked her out before, and sort of make a name for herself and reclaim her life.
Awesome. Madeline, your book came up in September, The Booklover's Library, a book about books. We love books about books.
Yes, I do love my books about books too. So yeah, The Booklover's Library, this came out September 10th. And this is a heartwarming homefront read set at the start of World War II in Nottingham, England, when a widowed mother has to send her daughter away during the evacuation that was happening for children in England during that time. And she starts working at this little place called the Booklover's Library, which was a lending library and is based off of a real place. And I knew that writing about a mother having to send her daughter away during the evacuation was going to be a little bit heavy. And so I really wanted something to offset that heaviness. And the Booklover's Library was really the perfect location. So basically, this was set during the time of the marriage bar. So when women got married, they had to give up their jobs to become full-time mothers and wives. And the women that worked at the Booklover's Library had statistically longer engagements than women in other areas of employment because they loved their job so much they didn't want to give it up. And the more I started to research the Booklover's Library, the more I started to find all of these real life patrons who were so fun and quirky, who used to frequent the Booklover or the lending library, that I thought, oh, this will be really lovely to sort of set characters off of these real people. And so that offered a really lovely sort of levity to this book that it really did need to offset the heaviness of Emma having to send her daughter away. So, and yes, it's definitely books about books, and it's written by a book lover for book lovers.
Love that. Thank you. I'm just going to reiterate to the audience that you're welcome to ask questions to one or all of the authors. If you would like to ask them live, please feel free. You can put your hand up or just share the question in the chat. So ask anything you have to ask of these amazing authors. Please do.
And we love questions, so don't be shy.
The next question I have is about setting, and setting as a character. So like the setting in each of your stories is obviously central to the story. How did you go about creating this environment, and what role do you see it play in the character's journey?
Who do you want to start? Do you want me to start again?
Yeah, you go.
We'll go in order.
Great at the very beginning. You always got the first one. You got this.
Well, when you're writing a Christmas book, there's obviously going to be certain components that you need to include. This is like my 22nd Christmas book that I've written. And so I tend to write a lot in that particular time of year because I think that it fits really well with my voice. My books, people call them comfort reads, which is I'm totally great with because I think we all are dealing with so much stress that we need something, especially during the holiday season, that we can sit down and relax into. So I feel a great obligation to make people, feel all the holiday feels that maybe they're not feeling in real life. There's always snow. So I set my places in, locations near me. I live in northern Utah, and so this particular book is set in Idaho, up near the Boise area, a fictional community there. So I always have snow. I always have, there's ice skating, all those sorts of things that people like to think about at Christmas time. Setting is very, very important to me. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to incorporate all the sensations as I'm describing a setting so that people feel like they're there. I really spend a lot of time trying to make sure that I have it straight in my head about this town, what it looks like, what the, geography of it is, what the demographics of it is, what the socioeconomic issues are in this particular community. So it's not just a small town, it's a small town that has dealt with, economic troubles and also a lot of social issues with people that have struggled in that community. So basically, I spend a lot of time, but I want people to feel like it's a comfortable place that they feel at home in, and that they can feel a little bit of the holiday spirit even when their own lives are chaotic and crazy.
I love that, and definitely well needed.
Mhm. I'll go next. So with historical fiction, would hazard to say that I think like the setting and the historical accuracy and like really that aspect of where it's going to be located is a hugely integral part, like almost as much as the protagonist. And so I really try very hard to ensure that things are historically accurate as possible. So I do probably about 10 months worth of research before I realized that the book is due in like 2 months and frantically write. That's the benefit of having written so many books, right, RaeAnne? Is we can write pretty quickly. I really do spend about 10 months reading through, getting a ton of firsthand accounts of the exact location. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to travel on location to go and do on-site research as well. And so with Nottingham, for example, it was really cool because I did get to see the original location of the Real Book Lovers Library. They have this underground network of caves that threads all through Nottingham that they used to shelter in during the air raids. And so I actually got to go down there and get to see what it all looked like. I did get to actually go to a real functioning lending library that is still in existence, which is pretty cool because most of them closed in the 70s. Having really that firsthand experience and getting to really walk literally the footsteps that my characters would walk in really helps to bring everything to life and really puts me in location with those characters so that when I write, I can insert everything that I gleaned through my research and also through my trip and put it in. And I also do find a lot of on-site books that I can't find anywhere else. So I usually travel with a bag inside of my main bag that I end up filling up with books. So I check one on the way and I check 2 bags on the way back, and it's always full of books.
I
Um,
love that. Anna, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I could just echo everything Madeline said, and that's such a good point about finding books on site. So I was really lucky and was also able to travel to Florence to do research on this book. And in the gift shop of the Duomo, I found some really wonderful firsthand accounts of life in the 14th century that I hadn't come across, in all the libraries in New York that ended up being really important resources. But yeah, the setting is so fun. Particularly, I loved really digging into the Middle Ages because it's a time that had always fascinated me. But in my day job, it's really focused on like Victorian and early 20th century stuff. So this was a chance for me to do a project and research a topic that was something that wasn't dictated by anybody else. So it was just for me. And what you see is that, we think of the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages, but they were really very colorful times, and just the clothing people had beautiful bathhouses, beautiful jewelry and outfits. The interiors were really richly decorated. So I tried to bring as much of that vibrancy as I could into the novel. And another really interesting thing I was able to do is by chance I went to Morocco. My mother-in-law like sold all of her, was moving and like took us all on a fun trip to Morocco when she sold the contents of her house. She called it her I'm Not Dead Yet estate sale, which was great. And so like her, but anyhow, so she'd always wanted to go to Morocco. So away we went. And in Morocco are the oldest walled cities that still exist. So while it's not Italy, at the time my book takes place, it would have been in this walled city where the streets are so narrow, they're not built with any particular urban planning. So it was really interesting to be able to experience what it was like to still walk around in a city like this. And I transposed a lot of that into what I imagine it might have felt like to live in Florence in this time, before the Renaissance has really taken off. And there's still a little foothold in that kind of ancient, pagan, magical world that we don't have as much connection with. And it was really neat to play with that and draw it into the setting.
Very cool. So we do have an author question. Yvonne wants to know which books or authors have influenced your writing the most. And let's mix it up. Madeline, you go first.
Oh man, now I
Put you
get
on
the
the
hard
spot.
one.
Yeah, you don't get that like pause to like think it through, right?
That's what, I remember one time, like one of my friends was like all into beauty pageants, and she said that whenever they have a hard time thinking of questions, they say, that's a really great question, as they frantically scramble. So that is a very good question. Um, I think for me, I've always loved historical fiction books. My first favorite historical fiction author was Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read The Little House in the Big Woods and just fell in love with it, and like read the series over and over. In fact, I had like a calico print dress when I was a little girl on a bonnet. And I will also tell you that log cabin maple syrup is not real maple syrup. And if you put it in the freezer, it will not freeze, but your mother will be very angry with you. So spoiler alert there. But I think that I've kind of grown up really reading a lot of historical fiction, and some of my favorites have been Alison Weir, and Margaret George and Philippa Gregory, and they are deeper history than the World War II that I currently write in, but they have this beautiful gift of just bringing history to life and making it almost sumptuous while you're reading it, and I just have absolutely been inspired by that in my work too.
Thank you. Anna, you're next.
Yeah, so I thinking about this when I was younger, like a kid, I always really loved the work of Lloyd Alexander, which are kind of these adventurous novels in far off imaginary places. So I guess that stuck with me. But as an adult lately, I've really loved Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I loved Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which is that, such an epic. Deep dive into the Napoleonic Wars, but with this really weird fantasy element. And also the icon Hilary Mantel. So all of the Wolf Hall series are all favorites of mine.
Thank you. RaeAnne, you're up.
This is always so hard for me because I've been a voracious reader since I was, 10 years old. And so there's so many books that have influenced me along the way. Actually, when I first saw that question pop up, I was thinking about my close friends who are authors and how they have helped me. I'm Susan Mallory taught me so much about plotting, and so I would have to credit her with helping me plot, especially as I started moving away from strictly romance and started writing women's fiction. She sort of really guided me in the ways to do that, and I've been lucky enough to plot with her. My other really dear friend is Jill Shalvis, and she writes women's fiction contemporary, and she and I email each other every day. And so, it's or text each other all day long, and we do writing sprints together and things like that. So as far as those who are actually influential in my writing career, although I could build on all of the books that I've read and loved through all of the many years that I've been a voracious reader, I would have to say the ones that really, right now, I could say have had the most influence on me are those that I've known personally, who helped me plot, who've helped me, when I've had career issues and problems like that. And I've been really fortunate to have a great, loving community around me.
We really are
I
lucky.
think
Such a great community.
It is.
I want, yeah, that's something I want to actually talk about is this community. And I don't know if the men do it as much as the women, but every author that I've interviewed seems to have this incredible community of female authors. But they're there to like you guys just like lift each other up. And it's so amazing. And everybody I've spoken to seems to like as you get more and more into your career, you get more and more connected to other authors. And I just, yeah, if anybody wants to um, comment on that, then I would love to hear it.
I mean, I can definitely say as a newcomer, I felt super welcomed. Like actually, Madeline and I were at a conference earlier this summer, and she was so sweet and like showing me the ropes. And Booklover's library is also so good. By the way, if you haven't read it yet. Um, but yeah, just people, I think it's kind of an open secret. Everybody hates asking for blurbs that go on the back of the books, but I was so intimidated to do it, but everybody was so nice and like, oh yeah, yeah, I'd love to help if they're able, and good luck if they're not. And it's just and for a field that you just hear is so competitive, really, I haven't felt anybody being like that at all. And it's really wonderful, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, the best friends that I've made have absolutely been in this industry. And it's funny because, I feel like I read so many articles that talk about how hard it is to find friends like later in life. And I'm like, man, I've had better friends at this age than I've ever had in my life. And so much of it has to do with the writing community because, it's all it takes, I think, is getting together and talking about books and talking about just our lives and authoring and everything. And it's like there's this immediate bond, and we really do all lift each other up. And I think it really is such a beautiful thing. And I mean, anytime that anybody has ever needed help, everybody's there to help. And anytime I've asked for things, I've always had so many people readily available to help me. And even just because I started off doing small press, and then I wrote with Harlequin Historical, and then I started doing self-pub, and then now I'm with HarperCollins. And it's one of those things that every single step, every new point in my career, and these like 18 years that I've been writing, there has been somebody that has a knowledge in what it is that I'm getting ready to venture into that has said, I can give you whatever information that you need, anything at all, you just call me. And it has just been so immensely helpful. I would never be where I am today if I didn't have all of the support from so many women helping me get to this place. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would absolutely agree with that. And the other, we are so isolated as writers because we are home alone all day with our
Yeah.
imaginary friends. And so we seek out, that connection and other people who get it. And when you walk into a room of authors who get it, it's just such a comforting feeling. I had the opportunity actually just this weekend to go to Toronto with Harlequin, and they had a gathering for their authors, and there were 100 people there that I've known forever. Most of them I didn't know, but it just felt like family when we were together again. These people that get it, that understand the trials and the joys, but the difficulties along the way of trying to write stories and stories that will touch people's hearts again and again. And it can be hard when you're trying to do it again and again.
Amazing. Thank you. This question's more for Madeline and RaeAnne, although Anna, you might be able to ask the second or answer the second portion of it. But do you have a favorite book? And the second portion is, do you like mourn sort of like the ending when you have to say goodbye to your characters after you finished writing a book? RaeAnne, do you want to kick this one off?
It is so hard. Again, another hard question. I do not have a favorite book. I usually just say it's the one that I've finished that's all through the editing process. I don't have to deal with it anymore. It's out in the shelves and I'm doing promotion for it. But the one that I'm in the middle of is always my least favorite. I always think this is the worst book I've ever written, and then when I read it, I'm like, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I love the beginning stages of a book, so I'm excited about this one that I'm just getting ready to start. And so I wish I could pick just one.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. It is really hard to pick just one, and every single one is kind of difficult in its own way, or really like fun in its own way. And I feel like, with the amount of heart that we put into our books and the amount of work that we put into our books, it's like they're like children. And I couldn't say that I love one of my daughters more than the other, or one of my cats more than the other. And I feel kind of that way about my books as well. But I definitely have to agree when I'm in the middle of the editing phase, or if I'm kind of struggling to get to the point where I'm getting the book on paper, that is definitely my least favorite book. And after the book comes out, and I'm like, on tenterhooks, sort of waiting to see what the reviewers say, because I think I'm always worried that this is going to be the one book that everybody hates and like my career is over. And that happens no matter how many books I think I publish. I'm always going to feel that way. And so once I do start to see that it is well received, then I'm like, okay, I can breathe, and I love this book again. So yeah, but I also have to say, just because I don't know, since Anna probably can't answer this particular one, but I do want to say that I also did get a chance to read an early copy of The Stone Wench of Florence. And oh my gosh, it is absolutely so good. You just did an amazing job bringing that time period to life, and just all of it. I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Wrote down the title because I'm going to go look for it as soon as we're.
And that cover is seriously gorgeous. I love how shiny it is. Can you show it one more time?
Sure. Oh my gosh, you're hired. Yeah, the designers did a really wonderful job
Oh,
with
it's so
it.
gorgeous.
Um, but I get to answer the second part of the question, I guess I could say, because like RaeAnne, I'm so excited to read yours because it's so different than what my head has been in for the past months. So to like, do you mourn the end of it? The editing process can get, or in my case, it's very drawn out, right? Because you're doing multiple rounds of revisions with your agent, then your editor, and then the copy edits, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember at one point just saying to my editor, like, I don't even know if this is a book. And she's like, no, 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 it's still a book. I promise. You just are so close to it, you can't tell anymore. So for me, when getting that final seal of approval, I felt very ready to close it and say, I love you. Let's see each other again in a little while. Um, so knowing that there's all these wonderful, cozy Christmas novels coming up on my TBR sounds so, so delightful.
Well, from the little bit of experience that I've had, I can tell you there is something magical in rereading your book after you haven't read it in a long time. You forget the process of writing it. It's like labor. You forget how hard it is, and you just are there enjoying the fruits of your labor. And there are many times when I've read books, I've had to go back and reread because I'm revisiting a character or something like that, and I think I have no memory of writing this and I become enthralled in the characters again. And so there is some magic in that. So someday you will have that again, I promise.
And just to revisit the second half, especially for you, Rand, do you mourn the ending? Are you sad? Like when do you have to say goodbye to the characters or?
I am not sad. I'm always, I always feel like I've wrapped it up in a way that gives them the happy ending that they need. I
Yeah.
do tend to write. I like to write series because I like to revisit those characters. So basically, they're standalone books in a similar geographical area. So like this book is the second book in my Shelter Spring series. The first one came out last year, Christmas at the Shelter Inn. So it gives me a chance to go back and revisit some of my favorite characters. So you can't do that obviously in a lot of genres, but in my particular genre and the kind of stories that I write, I'm able to build small towns where I can say these previous people that I've written about have a baby now or whatever. So that's kind of a cheating way to not have to say goodbye to characters that I've loved.
Now, I was speaking to an author just this week and she just writes standalone. And so she's like, I wish I could write a series because I get so sad at the end of the book. Madeline, do you have that experience?
So I think it's all the romances that I had written previously, but I really do love a good happy ending and just sort of having everything neatly wrapped up. And so for me, I do feel very like at peace when I finish my books. But I will say that every now and then I do miss those characters again. So like with the Book Lovers Library, for people who loved The Last Bookshop in London, which was my previous novel, my first historical fiction that was set in London. I do actually have a little Easter egg. I have a little cameo from some of those characters in the Book Lovers Library, which it was kind of indulgent and it was really fun getting to write that. And I've had a lot of readers that have reached out and said that they really enjoyed kind of getting to see them. And I even actually wrote a Christmas story for the Last Bookshop in London that I gave away to my newsletter subscribers. So, even if I'm not necessarily writing a sequel per se, or if I'm continuing a series with those characters, there are still ways that I've had the opportunity to kind of get to go and spend some time with them, which is always lovely.
That's nice. So I'm going to ask a very controversial question, or perhaps it's not controversial, but it's something that I've wondered myself, and I've never had the opportunity to ask any authors. But with AI, how does that change things? Or like, I don't know. I'm not a writer, but I can imagine like when I'm struggling with a sentence or I'm writing a newsletter or something, I'm like, let's just pop this into Chat GPT. So I'm like, how does that all come in the world of like when you're writing novels? And I don't even know what the like legalities or if it's frowned upon or anything around that. So I'm just, yeah, if anybody can, just whoever can weigh in on
Did my
that.
husband ask you to ask this question?
Ah, no.
Because my husband is constantly on me, like, AI can really help you if you get stuck. It can write your blurbs, it can blah, blah, blah. And I'm like a purist. And I'm
Yeah.
like, No. I will sit here and I will bang my head against the wall until something flies loose and I have an idea that I can work with. Um, but that's me. I do know that there are authors who use it, but I personally just prefer to rely on the good old fashioned part. And as far as, if it does end up infiltrating publishing, I'm actually in the process right now of getting my MFA, because when I went to school, I also didn't go to school, Anna, for anything having to do with writing. I actually got a degree in business administration and I minored in economics, political science, and accounting. And so now I'm kind of giving myself that permission to go and get my MFA in creative writing. But I am going to start embarking on doing book coaching. So just to kind of, because I have no idea, what kind of impact AI is going to have on my job. For me personally, I have no interest in using it, no matter how much my husband tries to get me to do it.
I don't use it either. I think most authors are at least most traditionally published authors are fairly against AI. I do use it sometimes when I'm trying to come up with character names, because that's the thing I struggle with the most. So
Mm,
sometimes I'll say, give me 20 possible character names for this woman who's 65 years old or something like that. So there are certain things, or if I'm looking for names of businesses in a community, I'll say, what are 30 possible names for a restaurant or something like that? And then I'll pick and choose among those, or lots of times end up throwing them out. The thing that AI cannot do is produce voice. They can't write in my
mm.
particular voice. You can say, tell me something in the style of RaeAnne Thayne, and it will give me something weird, but it's not me, it's not my voice. And that's sort of what the heart of our books are. It's us
Yeah.
and our storytelling. You can't get that from a computer.
Unfortunately, I actually was at a conference one time and somebody was pitching something like that, and they were able to highlight a selection and they would say, make it sound like Jane Austen. And in one click, it made it sound like Jane Austen. Make it sound like Stephen King. One click, it sounded like Stephen King. But it was only a couple paragraphs. I don't know what it could do with longer, but it was honestly like a little bit scary.
It's very scary, and I think it's very overwhelming for many of us authors trying to figure out what is our role in this new world that's out there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't use it at all, and I don't plan to, because I think drawn to readers are drawn to an original perspective.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I think if you read a small selection of it, you might not notice it's AI. But if every book you read is written by these same algorithms, even if the filter is through the style of another author, which I think a lot of those I don't know if Stephen King was involved in it, but I know a number of major authors are involved in a lawsuit against companies that use their work to train AI. So anyway, I think it would be, I mean, I don't know. It does seem like it's gonna happen to some degree, but I think as readers, like eventually we'll start to realize like the repetitive, little slightly flat, uncanny valley feeling of bot written stuff. So it's not something that I plan to dip into, except like how RaeAnne was saying, if you're maybe using it in place of a thesaurus or a dictionary, then it's just a faster kind of research tool. I don't see the harm in that.
Mhm.
Yeah, fascinating time. And yeah, it's scary. I completely can appreciate that. Like your livelihood is based on, um, well, it's like so many industries are like copywriters and creative writers. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
even more so them, obviously.
Yeah. Like for me, like it took 15 years to get to the point where I could write full time. And it's
Yeah.
like, so it's one of those kind of frustrating things. Like I am gripping on with my fingernails to make sure that I don't get flung out of it.
Joanne has a completely different question in a different vein. So, favorite bookstores or libraries worldwide you would put on a must-see list?
Oh, there was a really beautiful bookstore when I was doing research for the Librarian Spy in Lisbon, Portugal, and it's
Mm,
called the Bartrand. Oh gosh. Oh, now I have to remember the name of it. It was beautiful. It has like all of those Portuguese blue and white tiles surrounding the entire thing. And the OSS agents, the librarian spies that were sent from America to gather intel, actually used to frequent this particular bookstore and go through and get all of this like pamphlets and books and everything that they would send back to America. And it was so this one had been, I think it's called like Bertrand, Bertrand. But it's the oldest, I think it's the oldest bookstore in Lisbon, Portugal, and it's just really cool. Mhm.
I would say so in New York, of course, the New York Public Library is famous for their Rose Reading Room, and it's so beautiful and it's definitely worth the hype. So that's the main branch right by Bryant Park. But from there, it's not too far to get up to a bookshop called the Albertine, which is in the French Embassy. And you like go in, you say, I'm just here for the bookstore, and you go upstairs, and the ceiling is painted with like this beautiful mural of the universe, stars and this bright blue. Thank you. But yeah, definitely a nice little aside that's a little bit off the beaten NYC tourist track.
And
I
I
don't
just saw that I just saw that they posted it's Livraria Bertrand. So thank you so much for pulling that up for me. Sorry, RaeAnne.
No, I was just gonna say the one that sticks to my mind is obviously it's a kind of a cliche, but Shakespeare and Company in Paris is an amazing bookstore that everyone should visit if they have the opportunity. What I love most is discovering a little bookstore or library that is not on a list of the amazing ones that you just find and it feels like you've come to your home as soon as you walk into a bookstore. I just absolutely love that feeling.
All right, we have about 6 minutes left. I'd like to ask one more question to all three of you, but then and then just to finish it off with book recommendations. So I'll give you a little time to think about it. But if there's anything you're reading right now that is like that you've really touched you or that you really love, we always love to hear from authors about the books that are coming out usually because you guys are always reading in advance. Or anything that we should keep our radar on. Thank you. Anna put the link to the one that she was talking about in the chat. Also, so the more serious question is about process, and this is really driven by the fact that Madeline has this massive board in the back of her. So maybe you can kick that off. Yeah, how does one set up, and because they're all different genres, it'll be really interesting to hear this. How does one set up to write a book in each of your individual points of view?
So this actually is more like my annual goals for the year. So the top line is what I want to have done during the year. The middle line is what's in the process of being done. And the bottom row is basically everything that has been done. And I always joke that the bottom is sadly never as full as I would like for it to be. But when it comes to putting together my book, I like to joke that I'm so type A, I'm 12 point Times New Roman font. I am very, very pedantic and meticulous about everything, including, my research. Like, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, when I wrote The Keeper of Hidden Books, which was set in Warsaw, Poland, about Warsaw's public librarians and their efforts to save books, I ended up using over 100 nonfiction books for that particular book. And I ended up having like over 15 spiral bound notebooks that were completely filled with handwritten notes. So there is an extensive amount of research that goes into it. About 3 months into the research process, that's when I reach out to tour guides to kind of get like private tours set up. I research for about 10 months. I put together all of the character charts. I put together a very, very detailed outline. Usually it's about 15,000 words. So it ends up being about 15% of the length of a whole book, like maybe even 20%. And then I frantically write. But when I'm writing, it's like I completely am immersed with those characters. And so I'm basically experiencing everything that the characters experience. And so it really behooves me to write it in a shorter time period because I want to stay immersed in that world.
Mhm.
I plot very extensively as well. I always have an outline, scene by scene outline, where I know whose point of view is the scene going to be in, what's the character arc for that scene, what is the, main goal for that scene, goal, motivation, and conflict, which is always, the sort of the thing I go by in every particular scene that I'm working on. So I spend about a month. I don't spend 10 months researching. That would be wonderful, but mine are contemporary, so I don't really have that many things that I need to spend that much time researching. But I do love that part of it. I love the planning part and then I write a very raw first draft that doesn't make sense to anybody but me. And then I spend the most time doing my second draft. And then the third draft is kind of the polished draft where I go in and fix all the things that I messed up.
And you're typing this on a computer, obviously?
I am. I do my I wish I had my iPad down here, but I do my plotting on an index card app on my iPad so that I can move things around if I
Yeah.
decide, and especially when I'm writing a more women's fiction story where there's multiple points of view, multiple storylines that I need to weave together in a way that makes sense. And so then I have each scene, on a different, like if the heroes cards will be purple, the heroine's cards might, one heroine might be pink, another heroine might be white. So I can make sure that I'm, have enough about every subplot, and that I'm organizing them in a way that I don't have a lot in one character's point of view, and that it makes sense for the way the story is going to flow.
Awesome. Anna?
So I guess I'm more of a pantser probably, but maybe I'll get a little bit more organized as I go on. So this was just like a side project for me. So it's probably about 10 years soup to nuts from when I had the idea to when this will be on bookshelves. I was doing it in between jobs and life. So I knew the concept that I shared with you guys, right? This woman who has these magical gemstones. And I knew how I wanted it to end, but I didn't know how I wanted it to get there. So what I did is I made just a chronology kind of historic events that were happening in the years my story took place. And I didn't know if I was going to use them all, but I just kind of used that to make sure I was um, keeping everything kind of on track in the way it actually happened. And then I just did a ton of research. And as you do research, these wacky, amazing things of history present themselves that you couldn't make up, and they just fit perfectly into the kind of broad arc that you're trying to form. So when that happens, that's very inspiring to me. So I might like write a whole scene kind of as polished as one can get it on the first draft. Of course, it's never polished when you look at it the next day, but in the moment you're like, oh my gosh, genius, perfect. Don't need to change a thing. So I wrote those scenes that came really formed to my head, and then the scenes that were a little bit stickier, I would kind of just write it like a summary, like what needs to happen in this chapter, and you think about it until it becomes easier. Because I found that the places where I wasn't enjoying writing it, I realized when I had early readers, they weren't enjoying reading those scenes as much. So you kind of have to work it until you really do enjoy it. And yeah, write on a laptop, but I do always have a little notebook with me, or my notes app in my phone. So if I'm out and about on the subway or something and an idea strikes, I can jot it down for later.
Anna, have you started writing a second book?
I have. So it's very early days. The gem lore continues, but it will be set much closer to my knowledge of my work in New York, turn of the 20th century, and in the Diamond District.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Thank you all for joining us this evening. If you can leave us with any books that you recommend or that you're reading or that you love right now, then that would be really handy.
The last one that I read that I really loved was Kate Quinn's The Briar Club. It's set in America, like Cold War, and it's about all these different roommates who sort of room together. There's a mystery, and Kate has such a lovely way of really sort of introducing characters and then just letting you completely get to delve into their heart and love them. And she also includes all kinds of wonderful recipes that sound amazing. I confess I don't really enjoy cooking, and so I wish somebody would make them for me, but they sound delicious. I highly recommend it. And also the cover is gorgeous. It's another shiny, pretty cover too.
RaeAnne?
This is hard because I read a lot. I just finished listening to Richard Osman's newest murder mystery. I loved his Thursday Murder Club, and his latest one is really fun too, especially because it is narrated by the amazing Nicola Walker. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I loved The Briar Club as well. I was also going to recommend Sarah Morgan if you have not read her books. She writes fabulous, cozy. She's huge in the UK, not as big here in the US, and I always recommend that people read her. Her books are just wonderful women's fiction, and she has a new Christmas one out. I think it's called The Book Club Hotel, but that might have been last year's. I can't keep titles straight because I can't remember my own titles. But anyway, she's fabulous.
Sorry, Rand, will you tell me the name of the first book you said? Was
Um, I,
Richard?
it was Richard Osman's latest, and it's called We Solve Murders. He wrote the Thursday Murder Club, which was wonderful, and I loved We Solve Murders.
Thank you. I'm just adding them to the chat so that people can. I'm gonna spell his name wrong. Okay, Anna.
Yeah, I'm almost done with this really fabulous book, which is written by another one of the amazing women authors that just are in this lovely network. It's called The Tapestry of Time by Kate Hartfield. Probably great for fans of Madeline Martin, actually. So it's about clairvoyant sisters who are trying to stop Nazis from stealing the Bayeux tapestry, for which they have like very, as Nazis do, evil designs. But the research was really good. I learned all sorts of stuff I hadn't learned about the French Resistance during World War II, and it kind of reads, it's very like Indiana Jones in a way. I loved it. Definitely recommend.
Sounds awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you all three of you for taking the time out to speak to us tonight. We're going to we've recorded this, so it's going to be posted in lots of little places. So we really appreciate you spending the time, and good luck with your book launches on next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Bye,
having me.
everybody.
Been a
Thanks for
pleasure.
joining.